So welcome back to WCCF Tech TV, everyone, and today is April the 18th, and it's the official launch day of the Radeon RX 500 series. Now, before we jump into this particular review, we just want to point out that the RX 500 series is a refresh of the Polaris GPUs. It's enough of a refresh that because there is a new third generation FinFET being used, so 14 nanometer third generation FinFET is being used to produce these, so low power plus, as well as, well, the big thing here is it gives the opportunity for the board vendors to make some new versions of the graphics cards, even if it is of the enhanced version of Polaris. Now, the one we're looking at today is the new Sapphire Nitro RX 570 4GB edition. Now, if you look on our channel before, we did do a review of the RX 470 Nitro Plus 4GB and found it to be a very good card, especially for a 1080p gaming. And this one, before, just to not give away too much, is really no exception. Now, they did do a bit of upgrades on the cooler itself. So unlike the original RX 470, the new 570 is much beefier, where more of the surface is covered in actual heatsink, and even to the point where the heat pipes are protruded on the outside of the plastic shroud in order to better cool this card. A huge note here is the addition of a 6-pin, so there's an 8 plus a 6-pin connector for power delivery, allowing for smoother power delivery, more power delivery, because it does come with a dual BIOS switch that allows you to select from a silent mode where the core clock is at 1244, which is the new boost clock for the 570 series, or an overclock BIOS where it runs at 1340 megahertz. And thanks to the beefed up power delivery, it's able to maintain that core clock throughout all of our testing, which is a kind of a big deal for this generation. And to be quite honest, looking at the card itself and the design and the rebuilding of the Nitro series, I think Sapphire alone could have called this card a 570 without even needing a new nomenclature to go by. As far as I/O, the card features one DVI port, features 2 HDMI ports and 2 display ports along the back with a nice little Sapphire logo cut into the I/O shield. Now, it does continue their tradition of having a really nice aluminum backplate, but this one is even bigger than the last go around, and it does have the cutouts to allow for airflow to come up from the larger fans. The fans themselves do retain the fan check technology, as well as the ability to replace the fan and remove it for easy cleaning, which is a really big plus. Now, they're not the only vendor to do this, but they are one that does require you to remove a screw to pull the fan out, which quite frankly I'm okay with, because the screw is likely to maintain itself a lot longer than clips for whenever you're removing the fans. The plastic shroud has been updated with the metal inlays, so it gives it kind of a racing stripe to go along with the Nitro look. But the heatsink is really the big thing here. Like, the heatsink, instead of using a plate for the VRMs, it actually connects to the heatsink, and it has 4 massive heat pipes that wrap around. 2 appear to be 6mm, while 2 appear to be 8mm. So these are good size heatsink, or heat pipes rather, for this heatsink. The Sapphire logo along the side does retain RGB functionality. However, for our testing, we were having some issues when we installed the Trix software, which may not have been updated because we were running press release drivers. The card itself, while it's very beautiful and the updates over the RX 470 are noticeable enough, the real question here is, does the performance variation or the performance improvement warrant this being a new card? Now, for comparative purposes, we did put it against another RX 470, which is reference design, which is going to be more representative of what the reference 470 would run like. We also put it up against a reference 480, and then again against the GTX 1060. But it's important to keep in mind that this particular card, the RX, the Nitro Plus OC RX 570 4GB, is coming in with an MSRP of $199. So it's actually about the same price as the 470 models came in, and it's going to be a bit cheaper than the higher end RX 480s, which they're likely going to be on sale whenever this card launches, so pricing is going to be kind of skewed, so you're going to want to take that into consideration when you're making a pick. But we did test all of these games on our Intel i7 6800K test bench, clocked at 4.1 gigahertz with 32 gigs of DDR4 2666. Let's jump into those results and see kind of how it stacked up against its own competition. Well, there you have it, guys. There are the results. Now, something I do want to point out is the power draw. So it was a bit higher than all of the other cards, admittedly. It was higher than the 480, much higher than the 1060, and higher than the 470. But to look back at our previous review of the RX 470, it pulled quite a bit of power. But the thing is, this card out of the box is as fast as our Nitro 470 was, overclocked as far as we could get it. And on power draw, it was pulling over 50 watts more. It was pulling around 328 watts. So that's good. There is a reduction in power, and if you wanted to reduce it even more, you could run it at its silent profile, and it'll run even cooler, usually topping out around 58 degrees Celsius while gaming. Now, I know it did show 72 degrees Celsius for 74 degrees Celsius for the 570 under gaming, but that's at 20% fan speed. This thing is dead silent while you're gaming. It's the experience of gaming on this card is better than the 480, even though they were very neck and neck in performance. That 480 was hot and, well, a bit noisy. Admittedly, aftermarket variants could fix that, but me personally, I used the RX 480 Strix edition and was very underwhelmed by its noise factor and cooling. And even the 470 Nitro that we had was quite noisy, to be quite honest. I really didn't care for it, but this card is very quiet. It just runs. As far as overclocking, because the only thing that we could really use was the master, the Wattman software, and it was the press release version. It didn't allow me to adjust the voltages or anything, but I could easily run the card at 1400 megahertz on the core and an additional 250, so 2000 megahertz on the memory. And the performance bump was really not so much on the averages, but the minimums came up quite a bit. The problem is I haven't had enough time to finish all of the testing with it overclocked. So we're probably going to do a separate video on that of stock versus overclock and the value there. We may do the silent profile versus the stock overclock profile to a custom overclock profile to see kind of how they all weigh out. If that's something you guys would like to see, please let us know about that in the comments below. And quite frankly, this card on its own, rather than trying to sum up the RX 500 series, the RX 470 Nitro Plus OC is a very nice card, and for the money, it still maintains that 1080p price to performance powerhouse while delivering you an exceptional quality card. I know it sounds like I'm gushing over it a little bit, but this is the first time that I've actually held a card in this price category and would feel perfectly fine with spending the money on it because it's built really well. It's really cool. It overclocks okay, but we all know Polaris isn't like this overclocking king, but out of the box the performance is great. So it's definitely a card worth taking a look at. If you're on the 400 series, don't even think about swapping out. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But if you're still on the older 300 series, or you're just on an older card and you're looking to upgrade to an AMD card for whatever reason, this is definitely a good card to look at. Now, I personally would be perfectly fine spending the extra $20 to get the 8GB model, but it's like I've said in the past, you can $10 and $20 yourself to death building a computer. But for under $200, this is a great card. So this has been Keith with WCCF Tech TV, and thank you for watching. If you liked the video, feel free to like it. If you got questions, leave a comment. If you got suggestions on things you'd like to see with this card and other cards in the future, feel free to leave a comment, and we'll catch you all in the next video.